I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the Swahili dialects of the northern Kenya coast. I almost accidentally took Swahili at Columbia. I fell madly in love with it. It has 18 noun classes, genders, 3 of which have to do with different aspects of time and space. It's hopelessly complicated. It's just wonderful if you really, really love language. And so I took it until they didn't have any courses for me anymore. So they had me teaching the grammar of it. Then I got a Fulbright fellowship to go to Kenya for a year, and I stayed 3 then and went back, and I lived there for years and did research and ran a research center in rural Kenya. And that's why my Swahili is so good, even though my Spanish should have been better, because I was born into a Spanish-speaking neighborhood in Brooklyn. And even though I was there for only a short time, I picked up the Puerto Rican accent. So years later, when I became a linguist and listened to my own accent, I realized, where did I get the Puerto Rican accent from? It was not from suburban Senorita Weintraub. Believe me, that was my 7th grade teacher in Spanish, but I loved her dearly. So today we're going to do forensic linguistics, and I look forward to any questions you might have. So at Hofstra, we have a BA, MA, BA, MA, and you can see now, warning, that's all showing. The one of the cases we're going to talk about right away is unfortunately pathologic, to say the least. So just to be aware. These are some of my recent past several years cases that I was working with investigators and prosecutors. And here you see the wide range of cases that linguistics can be very, very useful for. And we're going to talk about valid confessions in a bit. In criminal investigations, they mostly revolve around these 3. Linguistic demographic profiling, and we'll talk about that. Authorship analysis. Those are the middle 2, my first 2 murder cases, God help me. And the third is pragmatics, forensic discourse analysis. This was a Danish case. My Danish colleague, Tanya Christensen in Copenhagen, worked, where the research question was, were the communications indicative that the defendant was trying to get to the Mideast to learn advanced bomb-making techniques that he would come back and practice in Copenhagen? And of course, it's in Danish. So the first of the letters, the I killed and then it's blotted out, was my first real criminal case in forensic linguistics. The Pennsylvania State Police came to me and said, we have these 2 letters and we'd like you to take a look and tell us what you can. I mean, they didn't use the term sociolinguistic variation, dialect, etc., but that's what they meant. So I did, and even though the letters were very, very different on the surface, when we looked under the surface, I saw that they were very similar. They were the same level of education, all sorts of things. And in addition, they used a rather rare rhetorical device. And that's a whole other story. There's a whole forensic files about that, the television show, A Tight Leash. So because of my success in that case, I was recruited by the FBI. The FBI had just had a great success in the Unabomb case, the Unabomber, and the FBI agent in charge at the behavioral analysis unit, Jim Fitzgerald, was asked to create a week-long intensive boot camp in forensic linguistics at Quantico. And he recruited me to go down to Quantico with him. And that's what I did for a couple of years. And then when Jim retired, well, also we trained all over the country, virtually every federal agency that has special agents. We went to England. I was recruited by the British intelligence agencies to train their agents in the run-up to the London Olympics. Because if you can do demographic information, if you can wring that out of documents, you can enhance the threat assessments that behavioral analysts can do. Because if you know that something was written by a 15-year-old in a Northern Virginia library, as opposed to Al Qaeda, these were threats to blow up the White House. I'm not making this up even. It's really very, very useful intel. So then Jim retired. We moved the boot camps to Hofstra, where I was teaching, and they grew into a graduate program, a justice project, everything. And we still have 2 week-long intensives a year. So this was our mantra. And Jim worked as in the BAU 1 at that time. They have different units now, which was counterterrorism and threat assessment. And they're in the CIRG and NCAV. And whenever we would present, somebody would come out of the audience and say, we have a cold case murder. There were letters at the scene, but it never seemed to us that they would be of any use. Could you guys take a look at them? And so it spread. And this is the kind of thing, again, sociolinguistic variation, dialect, hiding. When people try to mask their own usage, typically they don't do a very good job unless they're trained linguists. So they'll dumb down their grammar but forget their vocabulary, or they'll get their spelling wrong but their punctuation perfect, things like that. So here is a criminal case that I just did a couple of months ago, and it was authorship analysis, and it's a terrible case. A man was serially accused of serially raping his teenage daughter and writing to her in the guise of an analyst, a priest, an imam, a counselor, encouraging her to do that. And it was he said, she said, because his DNA was everywhere. They lived in the same house. She finally went to the police when her little sister was about to turn 16, which was supposedly the justification for the rapes. So before that, to testify, in essence, there's 2 kinds of witnesses. There's a fact witness. Somebody says, I saw the defendant. There's also lay witness who says he was drunk. How do you know he was drunk? You're not a doctor. You didn't take his blood. Well, he was holding a whiskey bottle. He stunk of whiskey. He was falling down and he had it on his breath. That's a lay witness. Expert witnesses explain facts that the judge or jury cannot themselves understand, like ballistics, DNA evidence, or language evidence. So we have Daubert and Fry, and judges analyze what you're doing and say you are allowed or not allowed to testify. Now, you don't have to be a PhD. You could be someone who installs bathrooms, and you've done 10,000 bathrooms in your life, and you're an expert in that, and you can opine um, on what went wrong or something like that. But typically, of course, in linguistics and the academic field, you need a terminal degree and experience. All right, so these are the actual slides that I showed the jury, some of them. So here are my credentials. Terminal degree, experience, um, great familiarity with peer-reviewed journals and methodology, et cetera, and then a track record. So here, the data, this is how we do authorship. We have the Q data. There's a hangover from old forensics terminology, questioned authorship as opposed to known. So we analyze the messages supposedly sent by the therapist and through an anonymous server and compared it to his known writings. As everything in science, we create hypotheses and see how well they explain the non-random distribution of the data. Everything, meteorology, which way baseball is going to go, and certainly language evidence. So here it's, do the linguistic patterns match the patterns that we find in the known, or do they not? Are they best explained as sharing linguistic patterns of the defendant's known data or somebody else? So the green is the Q and the red is the K. So this feature using 3 serial list. Now, if this were the only feature, plenty of people on the jury might say, well, I actually do that, so this doesn't prove anything. But it's not just this one feature ever. It's this feature plus a whole constellation of other features. And all of those features together, nobody on the jury, or very likely, you'll see this guy is very idiosyncratic, have the same patterns. And also, we are never claiming in forensic linguistics to identify an individual. We are saying that the trier of fact, the judge of the jury, using our information plus means, motive, opportunity, has to decide whether the person wrote it and also whether the person is guilty of whatever he or she's being accused of. This is rather idiosyncratic, and this is even more idiosyncratic. So I've just shown you 3 features, but there were over 23, I think. And clearly the hypothesis that they matched the linguistic patterns of the father was the superior hypothesis. And this was really the only dispositive evidence. So the prosecutor wrote me an email at the end of it. In this state, the jury decides on the sentence. So as you see, we work for prosecutors, we work for federal death penalty mitigation specialists. We don't only work on one side. What we do is we work on the data. We don't want people who should not be in jail or executed to be that, but there are people who should be in jail and off the streets. Okay, I now will ask the class. This was a California profiling case. A man was getting threats to harm him from a letter writer saying, I want your girlfriend. I've known her. She's very beautiful. Go away, or, you're going to run into some problems. So I am sitting there looking at this, and my old partner from Colombia walks behind me. He looks, he says, maybe it's my Swahili teacher as well as everything else, actually. Dr. Wald from UCLA. He says, oh, and he says 2 words, and then he walks away. I said, what? I couldn't figure out what I was to be seeing here. All right, so hint, the 2 words were not in English. They weren't in Swahili either. What were the 2 words, if anybody speaks French? And if you don't, what are we seeing here? As soon as he said that, I said, oh, I said, that's what was bothering me. See, there's a lot of intel here. What he said to me was depuis longtemps, which is French for since a long time. And it turned out to be the French speaker, actually, and it helped us. What if the note read like this? Like seeing people saying to each other, ah, wait a minute, I see this. Yeah, oh, good. Uh-huh. So now this is the actual English dialect of a certain city in the United States. This person might not even speak Spanish. What is it?
You got it, Miami.
Can you say
Right.
it out loud?
Very good. Exactly. It's Miami dialect. And a great linguist at Florida International University wrote a great article about this. Yep, Phil. I just presented at his class the other day, as a matter of fact. So I used this example. As you can imagine, it was good, home stuff for his class. And we don't only do criminal cases. I was Apple's expert against Microsoft and Amazon. Went to Paris and testified for the Turkish side against Turkmenistan, a contract dispute. Somebody had stolen a patent of Theranos. And when Sonia Sotomayor was about to become the first Latina Supreme Court justice, some people came to me and they said that they had evidence that she may have plagiarized her Princeton University honors thesis. And my colleague at Hofstra and I showed that there was no evidence that they were wrong. So I like to take full credit for Justice Sotomayor being on the Supreme Court. So we have a grad program, we have the 5-year, I have a consulting thing. Now I'm working for IARPA. IARPA is an interesting bunch. There's also DARPA, which is a little bit better known, which is Defense Advanced Research Projects. But I'm very happy that they understand the value of forensic linguistics. So if you just Google jobs for linguists, you're going to come up with interpreting or translation, which is good. I actually was the New Jersey state court system interpreter for Swahili for a while, which was an amazing experience, and it was much needed. But there are so many other jobs. People don't know they need linguists, let alone somebody who is at all familiar with forensic linguistics. But language is everywhere. It's everything. You learn how to pitch the special superpowers you linguists have, and there's just a lot of places. These are all places where my grads have gotten jobs in the last 10 years. And of course, they go on to, in the education too. And you guys can too. The federal government, contrary to what you might think right now, it has a lot of jobs open. And one of my students works for the Army Criminal Investigation Division. And she said, well, she had to apply to 50 jobs, but now she has a fabulous job. And they really value her ability in linguistics. I'm very proud of the fact that that Hofstra allowed me, right, that I got them to have an MA. I went to the dean and I said, I want to have an MA in linguistics, forensic linguistics. He said, oh, okay. I said, yeah, the Linguistic Society says there's 100 linguists in the US who teach courses on language and law and things like that. He said, oh, that's great. How many of their universities have a degree program? And I said, well, they don't have the vision that you do. He said, all right. So we started it and it just blew up really nicely. And then because I wanted to help somebody who was doing life in Chicago, we started our own justice project, and that grew into all sorts of real world experiences, working on cases actually of life and death, and we require our students to do that. And then when they go and, I mean, I certainly didn't have this in graduate school. And then when they go out in the world, they have a CV that says, I worked on this case and this is what I did. And this was what turned the trick. And this is what I learned. And that really helps people. And if your school doesn't have it, and as I said, we had it almost by accident, you can volunteer in refugee centers or things like that. Again, you get practical experience in the real world. We linguists really have to take over the world. People don't know what they're doing with language. We need to tell them. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on Melissa Lucio's case. So the Rangers and the detectives used what everybody in the US uses, which is read technique, which is once you decide the person is guilty, now all you got to do is get a confession out of them. And that's what Americans, I certainly thought, everything I see on TV, you name it, movies, go in there and get a confession, right? But the read technique was advanced science 40 or 50 years ago, but now it is simply coercive and abusive. And other places in the world, we'll get to that. Imagine what shape she was in after her 2-year-old dies, pregnant with twins, 5 solid hours till 3 a.m. Until recently, juries never believed that somebody would confess to something they didn't do. But you have the conditions right. They'll confess to having shot Abraham Lincoln after a while. There's so many horrible cases of clear malfeasance. And well, anyway, we'll get to that. This is a slide I use. I train the behavioral analysis unit, the people who deal with language there. And they're very interested in deception detection. And the basis of deception detection is, it's better, Labov always said, William Labov, my own professor and the sociolinguist of the world, not to lie. Lies can be found out. You have to shape the narrative that you are giving so that people believe what you want them to believe. You attribute causality to someone who really didn't cause something, etc. But this is very important, and this is the thing that I try to explain to judges all the time. There's almost no meaning in words, folks. I have this little 4-line thing that I use in court. And when I do it in different countries, everybody assumes different schemas. I was training Danish intelligence agents, and I said, when somebody says the teacher went to school on Friday, how was he going? Everybody says on his bicycle, right? So schemas are so unbelievably important. And then also the cooperative principle. We have these bases, these fabulous scientific concepts that we can use, and we do routinely apply them to matters of life and death. Okay. I didn't deal with the fact that I didn't think she confessed. Everybody else said she confessed. Okay. I was dealing with the coerciveness in general of her interrogation. And that gets so complicated. I'm writing one of the elements at Cambridge. And I also do a lot of research in Denmark, in the UK, on non-coercive interview and interrogation. And the BAU, when I was complaining to them that the field agents, FBI guys, were still using read technique, they said, oh, we don't. We use the HIG, and you contributed to that, Rob. And that's what this is. And I invite you. It's all online. And as well as being more moral, if you have to know whether to send your troops to Syria or to Libya, you can't afford to make a mistake, because the guy you waterboarded 15 times finally will tell you anything you want to know. This is all online. Just HIG FBI. So here's a little snippet of what they are expanding out of what Lucio said. They're not even talking about killing now. They're talking about spanking, which they then tried to augment into beating to death, but not yet. This is the middle. I'm responsible for it. They said, oh, see, that's a confession. Here's another one. It's harder to read. Sorry. I guess I did it. I guess I did it. And if you look at this, this is not exactly what you'd call a confession. I guess I did it. How? I don't know. You hit her there? No, I never hit her there. Now, it's much more complicated than this. And I'm sure that the Rangers would say, yeah, but look at this and look at that. And that's a conversation that should be had. But the long and the short of it is, Melissa didn't kill her baby. She fell down a flight of stairs, and the prosecutor was running for re-election and suppressed that information. Two days before she was to be executed after being on death row for 14 years, the execution was stayed. Now, 2 years later, she's found actually innocent. No rational juror could convict her. 2 days. How much time do we have left? We out of time?
Dr. Leonard, we still have about 10 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, very good. All right. So I am getting on a plane in northern Tanzania, going through Abu Dhabi, and I get a call from this task force to help them. And I can't, it's like a bad movie, you know, I'm afraid to use my phone in the Mideast, etc. Anyway, I get there and they say, this guy, we know from his open web stuff that it looks to us like it might be the same guy as Oxy Monster, this dark web seller of opioids. And for some reason, we don't know. He's in France. We can't extradite him. We've known him for years, but we can't extradite him. He's coming to the US, and we have one shot at him. And if we miss, he'll never come back. So I marshal a team of forensic linguists, et cetera, et cetera. In the middle of this, we're all scratching our head. Why the heck would this guy do that? And the person I was working cases with at that time, brilliant woman named Brooke Vermillion, she calls me up in the middle of this and she says, I know why he's coming. I said, okay, why? And she tells me. And I said, Brooke, you were a great linguist, but that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Nobody would, it's just impossible. No, I don't believe it. And she said, okay, we'll see. So what do you think, guys? Why is he coming? As I like to say, you have all the information you need in front of you. Give up? Okay. But before that, unfortunately, because of the success of this case, a lot of the guys on the dark web don't have open web platforms anymore. But, all right, one last chance to get an A++. And that's what Brooke told me. She says, there's a beard contest in Reno. I said, oh, give me a break. He was found guilty, given life. He rolled on his buddies and is doing 20 years. All right, we'll end with this, which, as a linguist, I'm always talking about being hemmed in by your own schemas. That's how people misunderstand what happens. They misunderstand what schema is actually operant. And all right, so this very rich guy in Beverly Hills gets 3 bomb threats. If I remember correctly, it was in a week. This was the last one. You notice all the different foldings and odd writing. And here they all are together. So what do? So the head of the rich guy's security, he said, I don't know what to do with this. So he calls up this bunch of ex-CIA agents and he says, what do I do with this? And they said, we don't know what to do with this. And somebody said, don't you remember this guy, Leonard? We heard him. Okay. So they come to me and I said, I don't know what to do with this. There's no real information here. I mean, if you get some suspects, I said, do the local police know? Yes, good. I said, okay, run this through the FBI computerized CTAD, which is all the criminally oriented communications. I worked on it for the FBI. And they said, well, our guys don't talk to the FBI. I said, oh, that's brilliant. It's like a bad movie again. Yeah. Okay, so with something like this, I decided it take what's outside the 4 corners. So gas bomb, that's what I wanted to look up. Maybe only 3 guys in the communicated threat assessment database would have ever talked about gas bombs, but I couldn't find that out. Okay. Jodie Foster was the impetus for a guy named Hinckley trying to kill President Reagan. So this was important, and this really got our attention. But I also noticed what's going on. This house is always on the bottom. Let's just look at Jodie Foster thing. She's out in left field. Gas bomb in this house. What's going on here? Every day I drive to Hofstra, the CIA guys would harangue me. What do you see? What about the bees and bomb? I said, I don't know. If we get suspects, maybe we can compare. Finally, I said, all right, what if I'm being hemmed in by my own scheme? What am I believing that might not be true? What if this isn't a letter? What if this is something else encoded here? What if it is, well, clearly it's Studio City on Ventura Boulevard, right? I mean, you guys saw that. You were just being polite to me. So A is Jodie Foster's house. I'd like to say my Intel insider guys told me that, but I just looked it up on a tourist map. And the blurred out thing is the rich guy's house. See anything familiar? And of course, I didn't move anything around. I just sized it down. So there you are, Ventura Boulevard, Studio City. And as I always say, nobody could have been more surprised than me. So I call up the CIA guys and they go, good Lord, this is amazing. Now, if we were in Criminal Minds, Jim's old stomping grounds, which he was the technical advisor for years, we'd get into our private plane and fly out to Studio City and catch this guy with a long beard and a black bomb, right? But it's not what happened. The next day, what do you think happened? I think it was Jodie Foster's set of security came back from vacation or something, but I could have that wrong. We don't always know everything that happened. But whoever it was said, "Oh, just what I was trying to do with the CTAD. Oh, this is Joe. Remember in Pittsburgh, he used to send these? So he's blah, blah, blah." The cops picked him up. He wouldn't talk, but no bomb went off at Studio City, for which I take full credit. So thank you very much. And truer words were never spoken. Thank you.